Private Lender Podcast, episode 26.
The Private Lender Podcast quote of the day comes to us from Pete D. Barnum, who said, "Money is a terrible master, but an excellent servant."
This is the Private Lender Podcast, the show that shares practical advice and know-how for new and seasoned lenders. From private mortgages on single-family houses to joint ventures on commercial projects and beyond. Discover details about investment vehicles that you won't find at your local bank or online broker. Listen and learn from private lenders and real estate investors, as well as from professionals and entrepreneurs, as they share the details, strategies, and the insight that allows for successful and prosperous lending. Now, get ready to increase your ROI. Here's your host, Keith Baker.
Greetings, Lender Nation, and welcome to another episode of the Private Lender Podcast. I'm your host, Keith Baker, and I'd like to thank you for sharing your most precious asset with me today, and that is your time. This is episode 26, and today I speak with Ray Sasser, who is a heavyweight, a big hitter when it comes to single-family investing in the greater Houston area, and now he's spread out all over Texas. But before we get into that interview with Ray, I'd like to go ahead and thank our sponsors, which, oddly enough, is Ray's REHA meetup group. The Private Lender Podcast is proudly sponsored by the following. The Realty Investment Community of Houston, or Rich Club, is the premier real estate association in Southeast Texas. The Rich Club provides its members with the education, resources, leads, and networking they need to earn more wealth with their real estate investments. The Rich Club has helped thousands of real estate investors realize their full potential, and they are ready to help you. Visit their website at richclub.org for more details. That's richclub.org. 713 Houston Area Real Estate Networking with Landon Rothstein and Ray Sasser. Come out and experience one of the fastest growing meetups of real estate investors. Visit privatelenderpodcast.com/sponsors for more information regarding 713 Houston Area Real Estate Networking Meetup. And now, back to the show. Okay, so who is Ray Sasser? Well, Ray's been around a long time. He's seen a lot of things. He's sharp, and he's a good person to know, especially if you want to learn about real estate investing. If you just get anywhere near him, knowledge just kind of oozes off of him, and you can collect it just being, in close proximity to him. So I was really excited that he agreed to be on the show. And so now, without any further ado, let's get into the interview with Ray Sasser. We are honored today to have Ray Sasser on the program. Ray, welcome to the Private Lender Podcast, and thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you, Keith.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ray Sasser is an icon in the Houston area real estate market. The first REHA meeting I ever went to, Ray Sasser spoke at, and he later went on to serve as president of the Realty Investment Club of Houston. He's also part owner in Alamo REHA in San Antonio. He's a part owner or co-owner of the 713 Meetup Group, which is a sponsor of this show. So thank you very much, Ray, for your sponsorship of the show. And Ray, you've done over 1,000 rehabs. Do I have my numbers right? Over 1,000?
I don't know. That's a guess. We've never stopped rehabbing. Our very first house we bought in '82. It was equivalent to about $100,000 rehab in today's dollars, and we just never stopped. We always rehabbed. And then early on, our very first house was a triplex, and so a big part of what we owned we kept, and we ended up, a lot of times you'd have turnover. When you start getting a few rentals, you'd have turnovers. So we were doing that, and so we were buying. And my brother, Audie, was my partner in most of those rehabs, and so he was a key part of that process too. It wasn't just me. In fact, I think that real estate investing is a team sport, and it takes a team. It takes a team to do all the different parts of it. So I've just been blessed by having good partners like Audie, and now with Charles and Landon and Sharon and San Antonio. It's just I couldn't ask for better partners because they're all go-getters, and it just makes life a lot more fun when you're real engaged and you're doing a lot of stuff, and you're making nice things in the process, like a nice house for people to raise their family in.
I like that, the team sport aspect, because when it comes to lending, and investing, whether you're buying the house and fixing it up and borrowing the private money or being the private lender. It takes a team to help you be successful. And I like that you give right off the bat, you're giving credit to Audie and your other partners. But listeners
and my
out
wife.
There, and you're of course. Well, you have to. That's partner number one.
Yeah, we've been married 27 years, and when you're type A personality, you're not the easiest thing in the world to live with. So it's amazing that she's put up with me as much as she has, and it takes her like what do they call it? A suspension of belief. There has to be a lot of that going on because you see the vision, you go to these things and you hear other people and you hear case studies, and then you come home and you say, look, we can do this. And then they're like, okay, I don't know. That doesn't make sense. And so then you got to do it 4 or 5 times. And then all of a sudden people believe you can do things. Yeah.
Well, I don't want the listeners out there to be fooled, Ray. You're more modest than you should be, but yeah, I do like that. You're, a little bit of history. I had Chris Funk on very early on in this program, and Ray Sasser was one of the references that Chris listed, and he was the first person I called.
Really?
Yeah, and because I wanted to know who's loaned you money before, and when I saw the name Ray Sasser, I was like, oh wow, that's impressive. So I called you, and you actually answered. And I could hear it in your voice. You're like, damn, why did I pick up the phone? But you.
That is not true.
No, I know. I'm teasing you a little, but I asked you simply. I said, look, I'm thinking about loaning money to Chris Funk, and what can you tell me about your experience with him? And you said, he did everything that he said he would do, and he kept his promise, and he paid back his loan on time within the terms, and it was really you saying that is what kind of got me over my initial hump of, okay, I'm gonna take that leap and I'm gonna loan him a good chunk of my retirement money. And so, yeah, I don't know if you knew that or not, but that's how I got into private lending. Yeah, and I called another one of his references was a banker who essentially said the same thing, and the third person never called me back. So, but I figured, trust but verify. But if Ray Sasser saying somebody did what they're supposed to do and would loan to, you said you would loan money to him again, then I figured then that's pretty high authority. So that's how I got in. I got in from basically you were coaching me without even knowing it. So
well, one thing is what I'm learning is even like with tenants. I mean, I've had tenants make me mad as hell before, and but it's a small world, and you can't burn bridges. If you find somebody like a superstar like Chris, you just try to stay as close as you can and watch them because you're going to learn something from them, and just keep your friends close. And you can do. It's never about the deal. It's always about the relationship, whether it's a buyer or seller or tenant or anything else. And you keep these people close to you, and they enrich your life. I mean, they keep giving back. It's like, how did I deserve this? What did I do to make this happen? Because these people, they got your back, and you can pick up the phone if they have special talent. They're more than happy to share with you. And I just love most of the people I know. That's the relationship I have with them. And I just love to be able to reach out and get help when I need it. And I think you have to be the same way. You have to be willing to give that too. You can get around people and you can say, that's a taker, that's a taker, that's a taker. And then you get around other people like Chris, and they'll give and take. And that's the kind of relationships you want to build in this business. And that holds true with private lenders and borrowers. I've heard private lenders say really mean things about borrowers, and it's the borrowers that make this merry-go-round go around. They're out there they're buying it. They're taking a gamble. They're working late at night. They're making mistakes. They're struggling. They're losing money. They're having to sell it. They're making all these pieces work. And then you get these private lenders, not all of them, and probably not even most of them, but some of them. And it's like they have a disdain for the borrower. And it's like, no, you can't do that. If the borrower doesn't have the tools or the skill to perform like you think you should, first of all, that's kind of on you because you didn't evaluate that right. And then secondly, it's your responsibility to pull him up and make him better. I'm assuming he's that borrower is a good person and not a crook or a thug. But we have a responsibility to make all the people around us better. And that borrower, if you're a private lender, he's either going to bring you into more deals, give you more opportunities, or borrow more money. So it's a win-win proposition.
Couldn't agree more. And like you said, it's win-win. And just because a borrower stumbles, not every deal is going to go 100% smooth. And it's incredibly hard. Yeah, and my mom has always said the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So I always keep that in mind when I'm looking at a borrower. But yeah, I like that attitude. I'm not saying go lenient and not foreclose on somebody if they're not performing as agreed. But there's a nice balance. Like you said, it's not about the deal; it's about the relationship. Because what I liked about private lending is, unfortunately, I jest when I say unfortunately, I have a job that I actually like, and it pays me a really good salary and gives me some nice benefits, but it precludes me from being out in the field every day at houses, and trying to chase down the gas company so they can turn on the pilot lights and the furnace and everything. So private lending for me is a great way to still be involved, and it's a great gateway because maybe I'm only making 7 or 8% on a loan the first time I loan to somebody like yourself or Chris Funk or another investor. But as time goes on, you build that relationship, and then it becomes, well, instead of just doing a loan, why don't we just JV on this deal? Why don't we joint venture? And instead of creating a loan, we'll just create a piece of that private lender will buy a piece of the LLC, for example, and it just builds. All great things are accomplished by standing on the shoulders of giants, and I don't think it's any different for real estate and private lending. To be able to start off with just loans, and then on a single family, and then years later you could be buying apartment complexes or commercial buildings, if you wanted to go that route. And it's all through those relationships and listening.
Yeah, because those people are out there, they're learning in real time, and they're growing and they're getting better. And those people end up being your friends. They're the ones that can help you do things. They're the ones that a lot of times in investing, you have 80 or 90% of the pieces, and you're missing that 5 or 10%. And you don't know what that's going to be a year from now, but you just know that you may need help with it. So you've got to build these bridges and keep the bridges steady and firm. And then you can reach out to these people and they'll come through for you. We get deals all the time where people just say, well, you've got a good reputation or whatever. Will you help me with this? And next thing you know, you're JVing with somebody because you can fill in that gap for them. So yeah. I love the concept of just thinking of partners as long-term relationships. And in rehab, if we're thinking in terms of like private lenders and you're taking a property that's not performing, it's not performing for a couple of reasons. It's either, or maybe more than a couple, but usually it's going to be a rehab issue and the property can't perform the function that was designed to, or it's design obsolescence or functional obsolescence where property no longer serves the market. For example, a house built in the 40s is going to be a 2-1. So you've got to change that. You've got to rehab it or upgrade it. And so, you're going to need private lenders for that. You're going to need good rehabbers, and or it's a bad management. And then even with bad management, it means that you're going to be spending a lot of money. And so you need private lending for that. And so I think you think of people, if you think in terms of partners, if you're a lender, your partners are the contractors and the buyers and your stakeholders. And if you're a contractor, your partners are going to be the sellers, the buyers, the lenders, and of course your stakeholders, whoever they are. So you've got to constantly figure out how to develop those relationships, build those relationships. You can't buy in slow motion. You have to buy fast if you want to be competitive and do more deals. And so you've got to put those things in place. You've got to build that relationship with a private lender before you know him. And he's your partner. So he's got to be taken care of. If a private lender is involved in one of my transactions, and I think anybody that's doing lots of deals, the private lender gets paid first. That's just the way it goes. And you pay the private lender first. He makes his money. because he's the golden goose or the goose that lays the golden eggs. And if I'm the private lender, I got to think in terms of the rehabber. His job is 10 times harder than mine. So I've got to figure out, how can I make him better? Does he know what a scope of work is? Does he know how to do contracts with contractors? Does he know how to calculate those repairs and this holding cost? And it's not because I want to beat him up as a borrower. I just want him to be successful. Because if he's successful, I'm going to get more and more opportunities with him in the future.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more on that front. So you started in 82. So you're a spring chicken. Obviously you didn't make it.
Yeah.
You didn't make it.
My birthday's Saturday. I'm going to be 62. You're welcome to come over.
Really? Saturday?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
60.
We do our wholesale. Landon and I and Simon Nguyen have a wholesale class on Saturday, but after that, I think I'm going to try to get Simon and Landon and a couple other people to come over. So you should come over. There's going to be adult beverages and that kind of stuff, and food.
Did you say adult beverages?
Yes.
I'll see if I can't stop by. Okay, well, happy birthday! But so I'm assuming you don't get to.
And by the way, I got 3 empty bedrooms upstairs, so you're welcome to spend the night if you're not able to drive home.
Are you suggesting that I may over imbibe?
I don't know. I have a tendency to overdo everything. So if you're like me, yeah, you probably will.
That's a safe bet, Mr. Sasser. But I appreciate that.
Yeah, I did get some intel about y'all's trip in Cancun. Yours and Landon's. I heard some stories.
Yeah, that was fun. We did the vacation with Mitch Stephen down in Cancun, and I was the only guy either smart enough or dumb enough to to take the whole family. Which the kids and the wife, they had a good time, and the kids got sunburned and everything else.
Ooh.
Well, that's what my kids love, the beach, and I'm a sun shunner. I'm very pale, so I tend to try to stay away from it all. But we. Landon and John Jackson and I basically, once it started raining and lightning in the pool, they closed down the pool bar. We kept the bartender busy for a few hours. I'll just leave it at that. And I will say that
isn't it fun though to hang out with people with common interest? And it is fun. We don't have to be competitors. We can actually work together.
Well, that was
make each other better.
That was the beauty of the whole trip. There were real estate investors from, all over the country. I mean, from Phoenix, from Florida, from Chicago, Iowa, and obviously a lot of people from Texas. But nobody had a chip on their shoulder about giving away secrets. They were very forthcoming with, when you're owner financing or creating a note, and the guy's like, look, if you're not charging an origination fee, something, you're leaving money on the table. And he's right, because the banks are going to charge it. Loan brokers are going to charge it. So even though you're owner financing, you're trying to help somebody out who's not bankable, so to speak, or mortgage ready. A 0.5%, 1% origination fee is not a crime to charge, a borrower. So that was just one aspect of it. And then there was Connor Steinbrook. He has a podcast. I'm going to get him on here as well. I think it's Investor Army, and we were just talking shop about microphones and whatnot for the podcast, but also with deals and rehabs and, what Harvey did on the east side of town. And, Landon and I have a house that we sold owner finance that flooded from Harvey. And now we're having to take it back, unfortunately, but we gave the guy as much time as possible without, penalizing him. And because Harvey came through, but he's going to walk away from it now, and we're going to try to do a deed in lieu of foreclosure so that we don't have to hire the lawyer. And if he does that, I'm willing to help him, give him a couple of bucks to move out and leave the house in good condition so we can sell it again. But it was Cancun, and I'm going to have it's a great little prelude because I am going to have some episodes. I did some interviews while I was in Cancun. I haven't listened to all of them. Most of them I was sober and coherent. So that's the guest may not have been, but at least I was. So I'm gonna put that out. But it was a really good time to just to network and to talk shop with people in a very casual environment. And even though there were gurus and coaches there, there's no sales pitch. Nobody's telling you to run to the back of the room with a credit card, for this limited time offer.
Right.
Just real easy going. And, I learned it's like having a seminar, and it was an all-inclusive hotel at the Hard Rock in Cancun, which is really not my style, but I'm not going to lie. It wasn't bad. The food was pretty good. The whiskey was really good. It was nice. So I can't.
Yeah, I don't do good in those environments where it's all inclusive. That's not a good matchup for me.
Oh, you got to go next year. Come on. Well, so back to, so you got started off. What were you doing in 1982 when you did your first? I assume you had a day job back then. What were you doing?
I got I joined the service when I was 17. I got out when I was 21. And then I went to work for Burroughs, which was a mainframe company. And so we would work on mainframes, repair them and support them. And I did that from, I guess, 78 to 88. And so I bought that house in 82. We finished it in 83. And then Audie and I went on and bought several more houses up until 88. And then in 88, Burroughs was shrinking. So they gave packages to anybody that was willing to take a voluntary layoff. And I took it. And so I got some severance pay and stuff like that. And I thought, well, that's a lot better than getting laid off. So I took it. And then up to that point, Audie and I were holding houses. And then at that point, we immediately started flipping houses. And then a year later, his wife quit his job, and she was our bookkeeper. And then a year later, Audie quit his job. And so 2 years after that, we had everybody had gone from that to buying and fixing up houses and managing our rental properties and that stuff. And then I guess, I don't know when that was, maybe 5 or 6 years later, Jan and I got married. So then all four, and she had a job and kept that for 2 or 3 years. And then she quit her job and started working. She would do like the bookkeeping, or not the bookkeeping, but the insurance and taxes and that kind of stuff. And also some of the listings. And so the four of us pretty much were partners up until, I guess, 6 or 7 years ago. And then, our family dynamics have kind of changed, and we still own a lot of real estate together, but then, we were also doing stuff independently too. And so we kind of went our own direction, although we're still partners on a lot of things. And so that's what we've done. We've had, you've said like the 1,000 rehabs. It's probably pretty accurate. We had, I've had one crew, which is a 3-man crew. We had worked for us for 18 years. I had another guy work for us every day for 12 years. I mean, there were years where we never missed a day of work on some rehab somewhere. And one of the things we did real early on is we ended up with some small apartments, and then we did a lot of major rehabs like fire damage and stuff like that. And that always allowed us to keep people busy. And so if we say we had a huge fire damage house going on, or say apartments, we always had the contractors close to us to where we could get those guys to go over and do this 2-week rehab or 3-week rehab. And so it's been pretty good. And then, there wasn't hard money and there wasn't private money when I started. And so if you're starting now as an investor, with the way technology is, the way leads are, in some ways it's bad just because it's more accessible. Data is more accessible. But this idea that you need money to get started, you don't need money to get started in real estate. You just need to have a good plan, and you got to be committed and just get an outcome that you're supposed to get. And I mean, in my opinion, it's never been easier to be successful doing real estate. And now that, there's the information, just understanding what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to do it. You don't have to invent that. That's already been pretty well documented. I mean, just like with your podcast, having this technology available and having anybody able to dial in and listen to somebody that's done, a lot of anything, that's worth its weight in gold.
Agreed. I never thought I would ever have a podcast. I mean, I remember when I was in high school, my dad bought a VHS camera so that my sister started her family. He wanted to videotape the grandkids. And so, we took it and I did my senior English, project with the VHS and sat there and spliced it all together. And, now
oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. And then now I'm like, I'm telling the kids to go upstairs and be quiet because, daddy's going to record. And I'm basically in the den with a microphone and a computer. And it took me, I could have done it quicker, but from idea to kickoff was a little over 90 days. And I could have done it quicker, but, I'm kind of stubborn, and I had to learn a few things the hard way to get to that.
When I was doing the market report, I would look in 2007. The real estate market pretty much crashed, and we survived because we had equity in houses, and we didn't have a lot of cash flow. But this flipping option just disappeared, and so at that time, a big percentage of the hard money lenders disappeared overnight. A big percentage of the wholesalers disappeared overnight. And like Jack Miller once said to a guy in a room that I was in, he said, the guys that are flipping and the guys that are wholesaling, they're not here anymore. They're gone. And every time we have a cycle, they go. When the builders go, they go. And so we definitely want to figure out how to be real estate investors and hold on to things. And in 2007, that's kind of what saved us. And we just need to make sure that we, going forward, that we have a good strategy. We have something that we never had before. And like I said, when I was doing those market reports, I didn't realize this, but I knew that I had to become smarter at what was going on with the market and where to spend my time and energy. And one of the data points we pulled up doing the market report, and I don't know if this is common knowledge or if you talk about it in some of your other podcasts, but banking is changing. Banking is dramatically changing. And we looked at the data, and there's statistics out there, and it shows how much banking is moving from the professional institutional lender to the mom and pop lender. And you look at how many trillions of dollars are sitting into self-directed IRAs and Roth IRAs and 401ks, self-directed 401ks, and defined pension plans. You look at that and you think, this world's changing. And so like you doing a podcast on this subject, it's really needed because these mom and pop investors, they're not stupid. And all of us live in a house, for example. So we all know what a good house is supposed to be. We all know when it looks right and smells right and sounds right. And we kind of all know how to figure out what the values are. So this idea that private lending is now available to the masses is just, it's there. And as long as you do the basic things in your due diligence, you figure out how to vet your contractors and you know that they know what they're doing, or at least you give them tools and show them how to do what they need to know. And you get your ARV right, and you get your title insurance right, you get your casualty insurance right, and do your LTVs right, your loan to values. We don't need these guys anymore. We don't need the bankers driving the $80,000 BMW, making the majority of the interest on our money. This is something that's accessible to all of us now. It's really a wonderful thing, and it's not going to lessen. It's going to grow.
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole purpose of this podcast is to bring awareness to people. Number one. Number two is to help them learn how to lend and to vet deals and to vet borrowers successfully and, mitigate the risk in there. And he talked about, getting the ARV, the after repaired value, the loan to value, the insurance, all that, goes in and part of the lender's team is, having the insurance agents, the title agents, and, brokers or I should say agents or some type of access, but even you really don't even have to have MLS access anymore to get a fair idea of what something is worth. But I couldn't agree with you more. Things are changing. We're living in fascinating times, and the banking industry is just one of the things that is changing. But I want something you said earlier when you said when you started off there weren't private lenders and there weren't hard money lenders. So I'm curious, how did you finance your deals early on in the 80s when you were getting started?
we would borrow money from the community banks. We had a little money when I quit working for Burroughs. I had like $30,000 in the bank, and I was single, and I could live in a car. I'm fine with that. Well, I'm not, maybe not fine, but I don't need high expenses to survive. I mean, I'm just fine eating. In fact, my kids, when they were growing up, they'll tell you they didn't want to go with me to work because we would go to Stop and Go and get a hot dog, 2 hot dogs for $1 and a big gulp. So I was not. You don't want to go to lunch with me if you're expecting a good lunch. So, so I was kind of frugal, and I knew I could last a couple of years on $30,000, and so it was just a question of getting money for deals. And we would either partner with people, or we would borrow money from like the community bank. We had a pretty good relationship with the community banks, and I'm a big fan of community banks just because they're local. They listen to you. Now, I don't know how much y'all know about it, but when I started, the RTC, real estate market in '82, the interest rates were extremely high. Mm-hmm. So we would get money and buy a house. We would turn around and sell it on owner finance. And then we would turn around and sell that note to somebody like Metropolitan Mortgage, which was $1 billion company at the time. And they were buying these notes at discounts. And it's something we talk about sometimes, like if we do a 2 or 3 day class with our students. But what we do is show you how to calculate these yields. So if you're a lender, how you loan money, what your leverage is, all that stuff, you need to be able to figure out how to put that in a calculator or a spreadsheet and look at your yields and go through some what if scenarios and say, hey, if I do it like this, my yield's 14%. If I do it like this, it's 7%. So you need to be able to compare apples and oranges. But I was the rehabber on the other end of that equation. I wasn't the guy playing the money game. I was playing the rehab game. And we would buy the house for, say, 50 cents on the dollar. We'd turn around and owner finance it for 100 cents on the dollar and maybe get 10% down. So say the loan was at 90%, then we would sell that to Metropolitan at 75 or 80%. Sometimes we'd do what's called a partial, where we would sell them. There's a thing as a note buyer called ITV, investment to value. They can't, if you're smart, you don't want to go over what the investment to the value is. And so they were limited by those numbers. And so they would decide, hey, on this house, I can loan you $30,000 or $50,000, not loan you, but buy $50,000 worth of your income stream. And then we would take that money and we'd make a little profit on it. And then we'd just go buy another house. And so that's how we did it when there was no money. But we also try to borrow from the community banks because we were pretty active even then. And so that's what we do. And then all of a sudden, there was a guy came along on the radio called Money Mortgage, and his name was Ted Murray. He's a real estate attorney, and he was the first hard money lender that I ever knew of. And I want to say early 90s. He was a hard money lender, and they would charge 10 points. I borrowed money from him either once or twice, and I said, I don't need to do business this bad to pay 10 points.
10 points.
That was the going rate. Yeah. And so that was the going rate. And what was interesting with Money Mortgage, and this is my understanding of what happened. If you're out there and you're listening and you're an expert on Money Mortgage, then if I'm wrong, then correct me. But I did a couple of loans, but I learned early on is become friends with the lenders, because when a deal goes bad and you have a reputation of someone that can fix it, they'll turn it over to you. They're not interested in making a profit. They just don't want to lose any more money. And so over the years, I've bought lots of properties from hard money lenders and some from private lenders. And I don't even go in there trying to beat the hard money lender up or private lender. I just say, if I can help you, I'll help you. Here's what I think you should do. If not, then sell it to me. If you're going to sell it to anybody, sell it to me, and as long as the numbers make sense. I've had lenders, hard money lenders, some that all of us know, actually they'll take a house back and then they'll turn it over to me, and then I finance it on brother-in-law terms because they just want that property performing again, and they don't want to take a bath on selling it, at a real cheap price. So they'll end up giving us good finance terms. But anyway, to go back with money mortgage, yeah, we did a couple points, and then I said, Ted, I can't afford to pay this anymore. And he didn't need me because he had people standing in line to borrow money from him because it was kind of new. He was, as far as I know, he was the only person doing it. Well, there was another company I never did business with called Golden Mortgage. And they had a reputation for loaning money, and they charged quite a few points. But with Ted, we ended up buying 3 or 4 properties from them. And what happened with them, and this is my understanding, in 2001, they had a program. They had so many people standing in line to broker their money for them. They created a quick refund or a quick buyout. In other words, hey, Keith, if you want to put $100,000 up with our company, we will guarantee that we'll return that money to you in a certain amount of time. And I heard somebody say 3 days. I don't know if it's true or not. So their lenders, they were guaranteeing that. And then on the other end, they started getting into bigger and bigger deals. And so they started doing small apartment complexes, large apartment complexes, industrial stuff. And then they started getting into development. And if you know anything about development, first of all, it's not a sure thing. And secondly, it doesn't happen overnight. And there's not real value there until it turns into whatever it's supposed to be. And not, if they're tearing the dirt up and doing engineering on the dirt, there really isn't that value there until they actually get something done with it. They got to finish whatever phase they're at in order for that to have value.
Right.
And when 9/11 hit, a big percentage, and it might only have been 5% or 10%, they demanded their money back. And from my understanding, Money Mortgage couldn't give them their money back because they just had too many projects going on. They were doing some developments and stuff like that. Right. Not them, but their borrowers. And they got stuck. And as a lender or a borrower, at some point, if you're a borrower, and this is just a guess on my part, but I've seen it in other instances. If you're a borrower and there's enough money at stake, you're going to try to collect your money before somebody else does. And so if you're smart, you're probably going to be real aggressive if you find somebody's in trouble and you want to try to get your money before they do. You better be dotting all your I's and crossing all your T's because you could get in trouble if you're that lender. So, and that's exactly what happened. He got in trouble because, like in anything, you can't always dot every I and cross every T. Right. So you just have to be, as a lender, you just have to be careful. I would say don't get into things you don't understand. If you're going to go out there and build an apartment complex or be a lender on an apartment complex, you need to know what you're doing with that. The advantages of doing houses is the data is so accessible on houses. I mean, it's very easy if you know what you're doing to either have somebody on your team give you reliable comps. It's very easy to get a reliable estimate of repairs. It's very easy to work with people who have track records. And so, just stay with what you know and don't grow too big or too fast as a private lender because you can get in big trouble fast.
No, absolutely. I mean, and I say with first timers, my first loan was to Chris Funk, had a great stellar reputation. I recommend people when I see at Rich Club or whatever, and they say, yeah, I want to partner with somebody. I said, well, there's Ray, there's Linda, there's Landon, there's, all these people who have several dozens of deals under their belts. They know what they're doing. Not now, do they lose money from time to time? Maybe. No deal's ever perfect, but starting off, don't go to your brother-in-law who says, you know what, I think I'm going to flip a house. I've never done it. I stay away from that. I mean, on several fronts, but if somebody's new, I always tell them, if you're new and a new rehabber or a new landlord wants to come to borrow your money, tell them to go to a hard money lender, because that's what they're there for. Let that hard money lender walk them through the process. And as a new private lender, I say, go find people who are experienced and, accept. Right. If it means accepting only 6%, 7%, take it. but watch what they do, learn from them, and I told
you learn so much so fast.
Exactly.
You just get involved in these deals and you just be shocked at how fast you learn this stuff.
Yeah. And then the next thing you know, you're spitting out, you're kind of regurgitating some knowledge, and it surprises you. It's like, oh, wait a minute, I did learn something here. Like it's just not, it's not coming from a seminar or the 2 a.m. Tax auction, stuff for $20.
Yeah.
I mean, it's you can,
and then expand from there. Just grow slowly. Don't bite big chunks. So like a first time rehabber, a lot of times people will say, they'll start telling you about deals and they're fixing to do $100,000 rehab. And like I tell them, you're not capable of doing a $100,000 rehab. You don't know how to estimate it. You don't know. We had a deal where a wholesaler wholesaled this house to a guy, and it's a good friend of mine, and he's totally ethical, did everything by the books. I mean, the values were there. He told me the numbers, and he said, look, the rehabber's getting in trouble. Can you just go by as a favor and just evaluate what's going on, see if you can help the rehabber out. He's willing to do anything. He's in a hole and he can't get out. So I drove over there, and the rehabber, it was $100,000 rehab. He was an engineer. So he's one of those kind of guys that, if he doesn't know how to do something. Yeah. But he could study it real fast and learn real fast. So anyway, I got over there, and sure enough, it was $100,000 rehab. He'd spent about $80,000 at that point, and he got about $30,000 worth of work done.
Oh,
and I said, how are you going to get out of this? Because you're like $50,000 upside down, and you still have like $70,000 in rehab to do. And then we went through there, basically item by item, and said, well, what'd you pay for that? And I said, well, it isn't $350 for the going rate for that work. It's $1.25 for the going rate. And that's what you should have been paying. And so like, if you get in a $15,000 rehab, or you're a lender or a borrower, and it's a $15,000 rehab and you're out by, 20%, you can eat it and you can make it. But if it's a $100,000 rehab and you're out by 20%, you're going to go under. And in that particular case, I couldn't even get a word in edgewise because the guy knew everything. And I just said, well, I don't know what I can do to help you. I mean, these are what I'm paying. I've been paying. This is the going rate. You need to look at that. And that's how you should be when you're working with your contractor. Don't use their contract. Make sure their scope of work is done and clear. Make sure that you know exactly where they're supposed to be when you do draws. If they're supposed to have this stuff done when that draw's done, then have somebody like a Kevin Smith who's inspected, God knows, 15,000 houses. Kevin knows what he's looking at. And there's other people too, but get somebody on your team as a rehabber or private lender, and don't ever get upside down. And I get upside down all the time, but there's two things when I get upside down. One, it's a knockdown, drag out fight. And two, it's usually not by very much. And that's what saves me. But when you get upside down with big numbers, you're in big trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something you have to be careful for. And that's why I appreciate you coming on the show and talking about these topics, because you can lose money. And, I always say that, with real estate, it doesn't always go to zero like a stock can, but you can lose money. And the first thing I like to teach people or tell people, the most important rule to private lending is ROI, return of investment. Then you can talk about how much money you're going to make and, the return on your investment, but get that money back first, that principal amount back first and foremost. But so you started through, had some money on your own. You borrowed from.
Hey, Keith, can I add something real quick to that?
Oh, sure.
So there's two guys when we started. I guess I'm going to say 85. I was by then, or maybe 86. By then, I'd probably done like 15 deals. I don't know, whatever. We started learning about land trust, for example. And I remember me and Tom Pike and another person, I won't say his name, but three of us went and we pitched in our money, and we went to hire an attorney to help us write a land trust that would be valid in Texas. And we picked the wrong attorney, and the attorney he just like, well, if you do this, this could happen. And if you do that, this could happen. And if it were to go like this, it'd be real bad and blah, blah, blah. And it was like Mr. Negativity. And Tom turned to me and he said, well, I don't hear him saying any reason why we can't do this. Let's do it. And it was like, now that's attitude. It's good to talk about the bad stuff because you don't run from problems. You run to the problem and you identify it, you address it. It's not complicated. You just stay in a place that's safe. Make sure you have the 5 or 6 things done as a private lender that you need to do, and you're going to do wonderful. And then after you get 8 or 10 loans under your belt, then move outside that comfort zone. And it probably won't be outside the comfort zone anymore because you'll understand and you'll be more connected and you'll be more involved and see what that person's doing. And I'd say, like, if you're my private lender and you want to know anything I'm doing, my phone's open to you at all times. I want you to be successful. I want you to make lots of money. And I don't need to beat you up because if I take care of you, you're going to take care of me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that attitude. And that's why you're successful. One of the many reasons why you're successful, but you take care of your private money. You treat, their money is your money. And, it's kind of a graphic saying, but I want a borrower who would cut their own throat to make sure I get my money back first, because I will loan to them again, if they take care of me. And, after they get out of the hospital and get a few stitches, but I'll loan to them again,
and there's lots of people that will do that.
Yeah.
You just got to find good people.
Exactly. So how did you get introduced into private money and borrowing from private lenders? You mentioned Tom Murray, that the hard money lender back in the 90s in the community banks. But how did you get? When did private lending come into your world and onto your radar?
I can't even think of the first private loan that we did. It was probably in most of the time we borrowed private money. It's been around friends and people that I know. You make friends at these REIA groups and stuff like that. One of the things that, like with our students, they think, oh, it's all about getting the deals and stuff. But if you're serious about becoming an investor, there's 2 things that you need to start working on immediately. And that's nurturing and building private lenders, and nurturing and building a lead machine where you can get leads. And if you can put those 2 things together, you're gonna make deals. And then as you get better, the deals will get better. But Keith, I don't know the answer as far as like the very first private loan I did, but it might have been like some sort of partnership or something. There's been several private loans where people, I'll give you an example. We have one person that we know, his office was real close to our office. And this guy had worked with his hands his whole life, but he'd also had like 25 employees, but he was not a technology guy, but he knew how to read people. He knew how to look at something. He felt comfortable that if something went wrong, that we would give it back to him and he would just finish it himself. So that particular private lender, I would give him numbers and information, and you could just see his eyes glaze over. It's like, I don't, Ray, you're a good guy. I don't care. Just do it. Don't even tell me about it. And he would literally go to the bank and hand you the money. I said, no, you can't do it like that, Robert. You got to get a note and you got to get a deed of trust. I can get hit by a bus. And if you're not secured, or I could file bankruptcy. If you're not secured, you can't even get them. You can't even get your money back. And so you have to build a rapport and you have to build a trust. But then also you have to take care of that private lender. And a lot of times private lenders don't even know how to take care of themselves. And so you have to make sure that you do that stuff right. If I were to get, say, divorced and I didn't make him a secured party in that deal, he would have to fight with my wife to get his interest back in that property. And he couldn't even do it because he's not even secured. And so we don't know what the future has for us, except that there's lots of twists and turns. And as a lender, it's pretty set on what the rules are as a lender. And as a lender, especially on commercial property, Dodd-Frank really didn't affect that. As a lender on commercial property, you just got to make sure, and we can go through it real quick. You got to make sure that you have a promissory note that says what it's supposed to say. You got to have a deed of trust that does what it's supposed to do, because that's your document that gets recorded. You got to have casualty insurance. You got to have title insurance. You got to know that the ARV is right, and you got to know the repairs are right. If you can figure those things out, it's almost impossible to fail as a private lender. And as a borrower, you better make sure that you're right on those numbers, because most of my lenders don't know as much as I do about the due diligence on the private loan stuff. So you've got to teach them. You got to help them. You don't. I've had it where somebody says, "Ray, what do you look at this deal? What do you think of this deal?" And they show me an MLS printout from a realtor, and it shows 3 comps. And I'd say, your realtor doesn't care about you. Your realtor is lying to you. Your realtor should give you all the data. Your realtor should let you make an informed decision, because when you're successful, that realtor will have more than one sale. He'll have a lifetime of sales. And it's the same with a private lender. Give him more. And the other thing is, when it comes to private lenders, if you're a borrower, think in terms of that they always have advisors. And as an advisor, you've got not me. You might be able to fool your private lender, but you're probably not going to fool their advisor. So it's just short-sighted. Those people never stay in business. And if you're a private lender, if you beat up your borrowers and you don't help them out and you don't bring some value to the table besides the money, they're not going to use you next time. And if you play stupid games with them and you take all the profit out of the deal, that private lender will use you once or twice, and then he's probably not going to participate with you anymore. I mean, not the private lender, but the borrower.
The borrower,
he's going to find somebody better. So you got to bring value, I think, to the borrower. And I've got one friend that's he's done 1,200 private loans, and 1,200, and he's a big percentage of those people are repeat users. And so he builds that trust. He builds that relationship. I did a deal with him once where I needed $20,000 on something we couldn't get title insurance on. And I just said, I need $20,000. And he said, okay, Ray, you're good for it. He wrote me a check for $20,000. There was no security instrument, nothing. But this is a sophisticated lender. He'd done hundreds of transactions at that point. And what it was is we were buying a note from a mortgage company, and there was no way to make this work. We had to buy the note quickly because they were about to foreclose on it. So we had to buy the note. We couldn't get title insurance. We couldn't get possessions of the documents until we sent them the money. And, we pulled it off. Everything went perfect. But as a private lender, and as you get more sophisticated, you're going to do things that in the beginning people tell you not to do, but then they're going to create the best numbers for you.
Yeah, no.
For example, let me give you an example. What if you owned a property that had a title defect that you couldn't repair, but nobody could ever take that property from you? Would you ever loan on that as a lender? And the classic wisdom is no. But I mean, I've got more than one property that has title defects, and I've been collecting rent on them for years and years and years. And I mean, 20 plus years.
And did you had loans on those properties?
No, but with 713 REHA, and this is something you and Landon and I talked about, we're forming a funding company, and the funding company the purpose is not a hard money lender, but the funding company there's lots of things that happen in real estate that you can dramatically reduce your risk and get involved in transactions that have incredible yields on them. And that's not something you do when you start, but it's something that when you have a history of doing it and you experience, if your yields are so good that even if you took 1 out of 10 of those notes and threw them in the garbage and you still made a lot of money, you'd have to say, you know what, I want to play I want to play in that bucket too. Sure. The first time I had that thought in my head, my original thinking was, hey, I need a $1 billion company to insure it. And of course, what is title insurance worth? Who really knows until you turn in a claim? But you have you have the title insurance, you have the casualty insurance, you have all this thing, and everybody wants everything to be perfect in life, and it can't be. We have to figure out how to control our risk, manage our risk. And I was at a thing with Jimmy Napier, who he wrote a great book called Invest in Debt. I think if you're going to be a private lender or you're going to buy notes, you really want to do that. And Jimmy said that he puts his investments kind of mentally in three buckets. One is the no risk bucket. Then he's got the medium risk or low risk, and then he's got the high risk. And he said, I make a lot more money with all my losses included in the high risk bucket because I know how to control and manage my risk. And as you get more sophisticated, just like you said, we're going to do a deed in lieu of foreclosure. Well, when you say that, you're taking a position that I'm going to go in there and personally manage this. I'm going to talk with the people. I'm going to buy my way out of it. That's getting into some pretty sophisticated strategies right there, but you're staying in it. But you're also increasing your yield dramatically than if you force a foreclosure, then the guy potentially could file bankruptcy. Your yield's going to go down. So you're saying, I'm going to pay a little more upfront, maybe counsel with a person and try to make this work. And so Jimmy said it's the three bucket concept. And that third bucket is on the high risk stuff, the things like, say, wraparounds and subject twos, that almost like a subject to almost never gets called, but it could get called. But if you have a plan of let's say you just had to throw that away, you had to throw that deal away and you lost your $20,000 that you had in it, but your yield is in the 30-40% range. How many of these 30-40% deals do you have to do before you can willingly throw away, not willingly, but throw away some of these things and still have good yields?
Yeah.
And so as a private lender, you have to get started. And I say start with the simple stuff, but as your level of sophistication goes up, you're going to find you're doing things that maybe other people wouldn't do, but because you've now done them and you've got close friends that are doing similar things because you're part of a bigger network than just yourself. Mm-hmm. You're going to say, sure, I'm willing to take that risk. I want to take that risk because my yield is so high.
Yeah. And I've noticed as I get into, investing and lending, my circle of friends changes and they also become more and more sophisticated. So I have a support network, people that I can ask questions to, have you done this before? How did it work out? And when I was a landlord and I had a tenant file bankruptcy, I called all my landlord friends, how do I deal with this? This guy's going to...
That happened to me too.
Yeah. This guy got 5 months of free rent.
Wait, you're a tenant. You're a tenant. You can't file bankruptcy.
That's what I thought.
But they can.
But apparently there's a federal judge that told me, no, he can file and you're going to have to wait.
Yeah. Well, I had a tenant file. I filed an eviction against a tenant and they filed in federal court for a stay of execution because he was a vet. And so you got to have good friends. That's the whole thing of 713 REIA. I've always been a part of a REIA. It's always done me right because in that room, when we'll have a couple hundred people at our meeting a lot of times. In that room, there's always experts. And in fact, when that happened, I said, anybody ever run across this? And a guy stands up and he says, yes, I'm an attorney and I'm registered to represent people in federal court, and I know exactly what to do in your case. I said, okay, don't leave this room until I get off the stage and I can talk to you. And that's what it takes. I mean, you just hang out with people that are doing things and you'll see what works and what doesn't work. There's so many ways a private lender to do JVs and to increase their yields and to protect themselves. The sooner you get in, the sooner you'll have this under your belt, and the more fun it'll become.
Absolutely, it's a fascinating field of investment, to say the least. But I've got to go back. I want to go down a rabbit hole because you asked, a title defect. You have a property with a title defect, but nobody can ever take it away from you. So what is an example of a title defect that on the house that you own? It's obviously cash flowing pretty well. And if it has a title defect, I'm imagining you're getting it for far under 50 cents on the dollar, which increases your yield substantially and your return on investment. an incredible amount. But what type of title defects were you
There's
talking
all
about?
kinds. Yeah, there's all kinds of defects. There's defects where we had a property where it was one of our students. It's kind of complicated, but there were 3 properties contiguous right next to each other, and the seller signed the deeds, and there were 2 sellers on the deeds. It was like a husband and wife from 1950, and the husband didn't sign off on the middle property. They're long gone. Their heirs are gone, and there's nobody's made claim to that property. The person they sold it to since 1950 has been in possession of that property ever since 1950. Nobody's ever come back, never made a claim. Nobody ever is going to make a claim. And if we had to, we could go back and do adverse possession because we did have color of title. But why do that? I mean, if you want to market it one day and sell it, then sure, then you can do that. But this particular one, the first property that we bought with a title defect, the person I met the 2 brothers, and they're like in their 70s. And the one brother died, his only living relative. I met him in a restaurant, talking to him, good old boys, just hardworking. In fact, he was a World War II vet. And so I'm supposed to buy the property from him, and he died right before we bought the property. And I said, well, you just deed me your interest. We never even did an heirship affidavit, and he deeded my interest. And that was 1986. And I've been collecting $600 a month rent since 1986. I paid $5,000 for it. I don't know. You figure out the yield. I don't know what that equals. But if you came to me and you had that same fax position, and this is what the money bucket with 713 REIA is supposed to do. If you came to me with that same fax situation, I would say, hey, how much you need? Here's your $5,000. Do it.
Yeah, I can see that. Definitely.
And if you're a private lender, there's all kinds of things. Like if a guy's a wheeler dealer, you say, well, I'll give you that, but can you put some other kind of collateral up? It's easy. Sure. You can do a blanket mortgage. You can add another legal description. Hell, he could give you a jet ski or something. I mean, if it's that small amount of money, it doesn't have to be much. Or you could say, well, let's do a JV, and then I'll take a percentage of the deal to cover my risk, and you get the lion's share of it. There's a participation loan, but so there's lots of ways to make that stuff work. And so, in my opinion, you don't want to run from title problems. You want to become a title expert. You want to figure out how to make title work.
Absolutely.
We just closed a property, and I just bought a property in San Antonio for literally, what is 20,000 of 135? What percentage is that?
What percentage?
I paid 20,000. It's supposed to be 135. So, and it's got a title problem, and I'm probably, in fact, it's almost like a lifetime, and it's a generational estate asset because my children could probably never sell it. Mm-hmm. And so they will be forced to rent that for their lives and their children's lives.
You're going to force your children into being landlords. I like that.
Yeah.
and by the way, quick math tells me
there's ways to sell it. But.
Yeah. Quick math tells me that's about 15%. That you're paying 15 cents.
Okay. So, yeah. So that's what we pay. We got another situation in Corpus where the lady just refuses to sell us her half because psychologically she's emotionally drained on that property. Meanwhile, the state's going to take that property, so we're going to end up taking that property. We already got the deed from half owner, and we're going to take that property, and we're just going to fix it up. We'll have the half owner sign over her interest and sign a couple other documents for us, and we're going to take it. And that's a little bit riskier than normal on the title problems. But I sat down with that lady in Dallas. Let's see, it wasn't Dallas. It's somewhere north of San Antonio. I sat down with her for like 2 hours talking about how she's never going to sell that property. She's never going to sign a document on it. She's divorced her brain and mind from that property. She has no interest in it whatsoever. And she mentally walked away from it. And it was, she went through major trauma as a kid, and her sister stole a lot from her. She's not going to do anything to help her sister. So, so what do? You just let that property go back on a tax sale? There's so many things that you can do. And the bottom line is, if you can get some control of it, you may not be able to sell clear title on a property. So don't sell clear title. If you give a special warranty deed or general warranty deed, you'll have problems. But, so don't do that.
That's
title stuff. We're supposed to be talking about private.
That's some pretty sophisticated. I did ask for it though. I did want to know about that. I fully take responsibility for that, because it's you said the conventional wisdom.
I think the key is the bucket. Is a bucket in a private lender. Start out in the bucket where you get 6 to 10% yield, and then figure out how to move to the middle bucket and figure out how to move to the other bucket. Because maybe one of the smartest guys I've ever known in my life on real estate and notes said that's what you should do. So don't listen to me, listen to him. His name is Jimmy Napier.
Jimmy Napier. Yeah, no, I agree. You crawl before you walk, and you walk before you run. So and
pretty soon you're doing sprints.
Yeah. Well, you are Mr. CrossFit. I'm going to throw you under the bus there. Yeah. 61 years old, 62 years old this week, and still doing CrossFit.
And I'm sprinting with 25-year-olds and 30-year-olds, and I can not keep up with them. I'm still sprinting.
Hey, you're out there. You're doing more than I am, and more than what most people do. So I think it's great.
Hey, can I tell you something about a sprint?
Sure.
Well, a sprint, if you don't know, a sprint is an all-out run, nothing back. You run so fast that you're not even sure you can get your other foot in front of you before you do a face plant. So a sprint is you give it all.
Okay.
And what's interesting is, like, when you're sprinting, like we'll do at CrossFit, we'll do like 10 sprints. We'll sprint for 100 yards, rest for a minute, sprint for 100 yards, rest for a minute. And what we do on those sprints is the first sprint will run like 50%. Everybody runs at 50%. And the second sprint, maybe 50 or 60%. Third sprint, 60, 70. Fourth or fifth sprint, about 80. And around the fifth or sixth sprint, we're running 100%. And I think that's, if you're going to be a private lender, that's what you should do. You should do the exact same thing. You should, and you will see that if you try to run a full force sprint on your first one, you will land on your face and mess up your face. So don't do that. But if you kind of loosen up and you got to get relaxed and you kind of learn what your expectations are and what's expected of you, before you know it, you can really run hard. And it's kind of neat. You can see that happen within about a 20-minute period when you're doing 10 sprints. But I think it's identical to everything we do in life. Is go easy. Don't push yourself. Don't get in a big hurry, and just do one or two. You'll learn probably 40% or 50% of everything you need to know on the first one. And then the second one, you'll be at 70 or 80%. And the third one, you'll probably be at 85 or 90%. And as long as you stay in a safe place, that's all you need to do. You don't have to be an expert on this stuff. You just got to get started.
Just get started, stick with it, and your expertise will build as you work through.
And hang out with other people that are doing the same thing.
Well, that's it. Stephen Kaufman of Zeus Mortgage, who I know you know quite well. He has a phrase. Proximity is power. Knowledge is good, but proximity to people with knowledge is power.
Yeah,
and it's so true that So when my advice to people, whether they're investors or private lenders and newbies, go to the RIAs and just don't offer to take somebody out for coffee. Offer them something that they can use. If you can provide a service to somebody at an extreme discount or something for free, if it's for you, I would show up at 713 RIA and volunteer to help set up and whatnot, just to be around you, Landon, to hear the conversations, Charles and Simon about the wholesaling, for example. There are ways to, get closer to people And you're not just a taker. You like you said earlier in the show, in this episode,
Right.
you give, but you receive so much more back. And then you start to build your team. You build your circle of influence, your circle of friends. And so that if you are a landlord and that tenant does file bankruptcy, and wait, that I don't own the note. This is he can't file bankruptcy on a lease. And then I have an eviction. I have a justice of the peace says I can evict this guy, and the federal judge says federal court trumps the justice of the peace, and you will cease and desist, and you have to let him
I
stay
know
in.
exactly what happens. The constable goes out there and says, "Oh, I can't do nothing." He filed bankruptcy, and that's it. You're done.
That's it. Sorry, Mr. Landlord. So anyway, well, Ray, we've I hate to cut this short, but we've been going at this about an hour, and I'm just going to have you back on at some point in time, because you have dropped just a ton of golden nuggets here that I haven't been able to explore all of them, but just from the title defects. I love the sprint analogy for private lenders, and I liked also how you talked about how you treat private lenders, and I think a lot of borrowers need to hear that, because if somebody reaches out to you on Facebook and they have a really good looking photo, and I can borrow from $5,000 to $1 million, or I can loan that much, you need to stay away. But private lending is about like you said, the relationships. Real estate investing is about those relationships. And I'm curious, but before we kind of close it down, any parting shots of wisdom that you can give somebody who wants to become a private lender? Maybe they got a good, they're an architect or an engineer, they got a good day job, but what kind of advice to get the ball rolling? What could you tell them?
I think you got to believe in something before you can actually take action. And the only way you can believe in it is see it with your own eyes. So, Landon and I did that. We have the platform called 713 REHAB. We do that because it's when you go in there, you're surrounded by doers. I mean, there are a lot of people that are maybe not doers and they're trying to learn, but I'd say the majority of our audience, not majority, but a big percentage are doers. And just, you got to be around them and you got to find out. One of the things we try to do in that platform is do real case studies of where people did deals and where they did things that worked out really good and where they also made huge blunders or maybe minor blunders. And then you get to know them. And then because it's real informal, when they sit down or when they take a break, go talk to them and find out how they did it. What did they do? And we try to bring those kind of people to that platform. People that are actually out there learning under fire. And I think that's what you got to do is you got to go where they're at. You got to talk to them. You got to find out if they got, if you came to me and said, Ray, I'd like to maybe be one of your private lenders. Can you show me some of the stuff you're doing? What am I going to say? Of course, you never have enough money. So I'm going to say, yeah, we're going to be over at this house. I'm going to go buy this house today. Or our rehab crew starts over here. Come over here and just follow me and I'll show you exactly what they're doing. Landon and Simon would do the same thing. I'm sure you would too. Mm-hmm. And that's what you got to get. But I mean, it's like the law of reciprocity. You said, hey, I'm going to help you if you can show me how it makes sense. Well, of course I'm going to show you if I can. I mean, if there's any way I can get through to you, I will.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, listeners, you can take that to the bank. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten emails from people or text messages. And the Woodlands, for example, is north of Houston. And Ray took one of his students had gotten had a deal on a very large house, and something that I didn't know because I grew up on the southwest side in the Sugar Land area. There's a lot of stucco in the Woodlands, and within 5 minutes of walking in and Ray kind of starting the class, your first question was, "This house is in the Woodlands. What's the condition of the stucco?" And lo and behold, there was an inspection, and your student had to go back and negotiate the price with the seller a little, to bring it down a little bit, because now all of a sudden that scope of work changed significantly. And, when you have a $600,000 home that you're purchasing at $300,000, 10% is a lot of money. That's a big swing. And, if it takes $35,000 to get everything sealed up and made right, then, you have to go back and do that. So and I think that's one of the benefits of, going to the 713 meetup and, being around people like yourself and Landon is you get that, and you didn't even charge. And you just, you put it out there, and, your partner at the time had Facebook Live going, and it was quite a neat deal. And, you're right there in a house, the carpet's pulled up, there's cat pee everywhere, like you're in it, there's no mistaking that. But if somebody wanted to meet you at one of those houses or become your private lender or just learn more about the meetup and whatnot, how can people get a hold of you?
Just Ray at rehabbed.com, SASSER, all S's like Sam, Ray at rehabbed.com, or text me 281-727-8717, 281-727-8717.
Wow, you're a brave man.
And then, of course, 713REA.com. Our next meeting is Wednesday at 125 Airtex, and it's a lot of fun. It's a good meeting.
It is, and it's one of the fastest growing. I mean, you get good guests, and it started with just really, it was just your office and Landon's office getting together for lunch.
Well, if you don't know Landon, I'll just tell you, he's a bulldozer. I mean, Landon goes 100 miles an hour all the time, and it started out with just him and I and our office and his office meeting because we wanted to talk about best practices. How do we all do better? What's our process like if we're retailing a property? What are our steps? And so we just thought, hey, we'll get everybody together once a month and share our ideas. And then somebody said, well, let's invite a few more people, and then a few more people. And so we went from basically 8 to 10 to 20. So then we moved to Los Cucos, and it went from 25 to 75. And then we moved over to the hotel, and now we've been averaging around 200 people a month.
Yeah.
But it's grassroots things. It's just, a street level type meeting. This is not big, highfalutin philosophies and theories. It's like, what are you doing? How's it working? What are the neatest tools that we're using? We always try to have like an attorney come an hour early, and we'll try to get an attorney either on probate or title, somebody that's real estate related, and have them kind of have an open session with anybody that wants to come up an hour early and talk about legal issues that relate to real estate. So, I would take advantage of that if you can. Oh, yeah. Attorneys are happy to do it too because, it helps them build their business. And on top of that, we're trying to use guys that we know firsthand are really engaged and actually working with investors.
It's a great meeting. I usually have my table set up, and I try to get there early just so I can hear those, whether it be an attorney or lead generation, marketing, whatever the topic may be. It's definitely a good meeting to check out, and you can get all this information on the 713 REIA and how to contact Ray at the show notes at the privatelenderpodcast.com. And I want to throw in one last little jab at you. You're a brave man giving out your cell phone number for text messages on a podcast. So I hope it works out well for you in that regard. So Ray, I want to thank you again. I appreciate you coming on. You've honored me today.
Thank you, Keith.
And I can't wait to have you.
Well, thanks for asking me. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. I can think of 4 or 5 more episodes we could record easily. So I will definitely be in touch. So
take care.
Take care. Bye. All right. That's going to do it. I'd like to thank Ray Sasser for coming on today's episode. And remember, you can go get all the contact information and information that was discussed during the episode today at the show notes page at the privatelenderpodcast.com. This will be episode 26. And don't forget that on August 25th and 26th, 2018, I'll be in Dallas at the Quest IRA Expo, the first of its kind. So come on out, say hello, and learn a ton of interesting things about self-directed IRAs that you might not have known about, and find out just how powerful they can be. I'll see you guys on the next episode, but until then, I wish you happy and prosperous lending and investing. Take care.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Private Lender Podcast with your host, Keith Baker. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit privatelenderpodcast.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review, and we'll catch you next time.